Greetings, welcome, and thank you for clicking. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing Company, supporting your journey with healing experiences, coaching, and encouragement for life's changes, challenges, and transitions. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Ask the Stones, offering spiritual guidance and encouragement for life's challenging questions. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Ask the Stones. Our question for this episode is about altars. Hello, I am learning a lot about spirituality and have heard about altars. I think I would like to have an altar. What should I put on my altar? Jane. Jane, anything you want. Next question. I'm kidding. Jane, thank you so much for this question. This is a great question. And so wonderful to get a question and get to talk about altars. What a wonderful topic. So thank you, Jane, so much. And yes, actually, the truth is that the short answer is anything that you want. Altars are something that is so wonderfully individual and personal that it really is up to you. So, Jane, let me back up a moment for anyone who might be curious about altars, wondering what they are, wondering how to set one up, just wondering what they're all about in general. Of course, altars have a very long history, and typically we think of altars as having to do with something that we find in churches. And certainly we can and do find altars in churches and other places of religious worship or gathering. And altars are not confined to houses of worship, and we can, of course, create our own sacred spaces of the altar in our own homes and even outside of our homes. So what an altar is really is that it is an external expression of your internal feelings of sacredness and spirituality. Now, this is my personal definition of an altar, and of course, you'll find different people who regard altars in different ways and define it in a different way. So this isn't a definition that I have found somewhere. This is actually just one that I'm actually Jane, coming up with right now, because altars isn't something that I've been asked to talk about before, that I've been asked about. So I haven't really had to think a whole lot about my own experience with altars. So again, Jane, thank you for this invitation to be able to talk about and think about these things for my own self. So to me, an altar is really an external space that represents aspects of our internal space. And, for me, this idea really comes from a place that's very sacred to me, St. Bridget's Shrine in Western Ireland in County Clare. This space to me is very sacred. It is a shrine. It is a shrine that has existed for many, many years, where before it was a Christian shrine dedicated to St. Bridget, it was a holy well that was revered. And so at this point, it is a space where people come and they leave religious artifacts and mementos of their loved ones. And it's and of course, there's the water from the well. It's a very sacred, quiet, peaceful kind of place. And for me, that space is very much altar-like. And for me, that space, to me, represents what I feel my insides look like. And so this is the way that I kind of conceptualize altars themselves. It is a space where we can have a collection of materials, objects that are sacred to us, that are meaningful to us, and that express aspects of our own inner spirituality. So I'm actually sitting beside my altar right now, Jane. I actually conduct all of my ceremonies, all of my card readings, all of my work for Standing Stones Healing beside my altar, because it is a very sacred and important space for me. So I'm sitting beside my altar right now. And so my altar currently is a table. I have to tell you, Jane, that I picked this table up on the curb. That is something that very much I do. And so I had been thinking, several years ago that I had an altar space. Of course, I've had an altar for years. And I had my altar set up on a bookshelf, and I had a big bookcase, and I cleared away a shelf, took all the books off, relocated them, and used that shelf for my altar. And that was at eye level when I sat down on my meditation beanbag chair. And that was my altar. And I had been saying to myself, I need an actual table. Like, I want to move my altar from that bookshelf, and I want to have a designated table for it. So I thought, I need to be on the lookout for a table. Well, wouldn't you know, as it would happen, just a few days later, I look out my window in the morning, and across the street from my apartment, there sits a beautiful black, I don't know, I think it's IKEA. I don't know, probably. Beautiful black table. And as soon as I saw it, I said, yes, that's it. I want that table. I ran out 7 o'clock in the morning and grabbed this table. And that was, 6 years ago. So since then, I have been using this beautiful table for my altar. So a few things I'll say about how I construct my altar and what's on it. Now, to me, my altar is a very sacred space. And so I will put objects on my altar that are very sacred to me. And they are so sacred that I don't want or like anyone touching the objects. And some of the objects, Jane, are so sacred to me that I don't even want other people to see them. And that may sound very strange. And that may sound even, peculiar and like, oh, Christian, what are you trying to hide? But no, these are just objects that are very sacred to me. And frankly, if I have visitors, I very well may cover over my altar, because some of the objects on it, some people might not understand. Some people might not understand the point of an altar, or, to see this, and rather than have them look at the table and say, what is all that crap? I would rather have them not scrutinizing my some very personal objects that have to do with some very personal, sacred feelings that I have. So I choose to do that. Now, I should say I have chosen to do that. At other times in my life, I've had my altar in a space where no one else is going to see it anyway, a bedroom with the door always closed. And so I don't worry about covering up. But in my previous apartment, when I would have visitors, I would cover the altar over. In my current house, it's actually in a very visible place, but I don't have many visitors. That's not said to make you feel sorry for me, Jane. Remember, at the time I'm recording this, there is a pandemic, so I have not had anyone over since I have relocated my altar to a very open space. But if I did have visitors at this time, I would cover over my altar, and I cover that over with a tablecloth. That's just to, again, preserve the sacred nature of it, because to me it is a very sacred space. So what Should you put on your altar? Yes, anything that you want. Let me tell you a few things that I have on my altar. So I always have on my altar some very sacred feathers. I have an animal that is a very sacred animal to me. So I have some of those feathers. I have gifts from the spirit of the woods, including those feathers. So when I am out on my numerous hikes, enjoying nature, I am at times gifted with beautiful blessings from the spirit of the woods. And so I have a few of those on my altar. And I have cards. Every full moon, I pull cards for myself for that month, and so I always put those cards on my altar so that I can look at them as I meditate. I have my singing bowl that I use for meditation and for my distant Reiki healing ceremonies. Before and after, as that marks the time when I send Reiki, and I also use that bowl daily for myself for my meditations. I have crystals on my altar, crystals that are special to me. I have on my altar, I have rocks from different places that have significant meaning to me. I have an incense holder, so I will burn incense from my altar. I have sage. I have some cards. I have a small statue of Mary. A few other things, prayer flags hanging above my altar. And also I will put fresh flowers on my altar that are from my garden. So actually right now I'm recording this in early spring. Just this morning I cut some daffodils from my yard, and those are in a vase on my altar. And so this is where I conduct my daily meditations. It's where I record my answers for questions for Ask the Stones. It's where I do my card readings. So I do all of my spiritual work at this space, from this space, this sacred space. You can place an altar wherever you might like, Jane. As a matter of fact, you may want multiple altars, and that's okay. That's absolutely something you can do. You may want to have themed altars where you have an altar in one room and it has a theme, maybe an altar in another room with a different theme. You can do that. You can place on there things on your altar that change, or they can be static. You can have a very small altar, or you can have a large one. You know, as a matter of fact, I even at a point where I was living, I had one bedroom. I was in a shared living space. Okay, I was living with my parents, Jane, and I was in my bedroom, had my altar, and it was just the top of my stereo is where my altar was, and where I had my sacred objects, and where I was really able to have that as a focus of my spiritual center at that space. And so, you know, the possibilities are really endless, Jane. You can put your altar anywhere you like. Now, even, you know, some people will align their altar in a special way. So they might face it east toward the rising sun, or west. My altar currently faces almost due north. That wasn't necessarily on purpose. Because I will say that my previous altar in this house, I did have my altar set up previously, again, on a bookshelf, because that was how it felt right to me in that moment as I was getting my house set up and everything else. That aligned to the west. But in my home before this one, in my previous apartment, my altar did align north. again, and that did feel right. And so I really like this location for my altar, but I can foresee it moving to another place in my home in the future. And so this is all very flexible and fluid, Jane. Just as you change and grow spiritually, your altar can and will change and grow too. And it's a wonderful space to have for you to expand your spirituality, for you to grow yourself, and to place different things on your altar for different things that you want to emphasize in your life. I don't currently now, but previously I did on my altar a few years ago. In my previous home, I did have vision boards set up on my altar. And so that may be something you want to do as well. I have my cards that I use sitting beside my altar. My incense is here too. That's all sitting beside my altar, ready to go. Around my altar space, I have my flutes, I have my drums. And so that is really a sacred, this really is a sacred space for me, very much so. You know, with any sacred space, what really makes it sacred is your saying so. Saying that it is sacred and then treating it as it is sacred. And the repetition of that. So if you just have a special seat that you like to sit in when you meditate, and you do that once, if you keep going back and keep going back to that seat and using it for that specific reason, then it's going to become a sacred seat for you. And it's the same kind of thing with your altar. You know, the way in which you use a space is going to inform the way in which you feel about the space. And so the way in which you not only set up your altar, but the way in which you use it is going to inform the way you feel about it, and also, therefore, inform the way that you use it. So the key to this then is intention, Jane. Setting the intention for your altar. What do you want your space to represent? What do you want it to hold? What do you want to bring to it, and what do you want to even get from it? And so seeing the altar as a sacred space that you approach with intention, whatever those intentions are, Jane. That, of course, is completely your choice. And that is the beautiful thing about sacred spaces, and the beautiful thing about your own individual sacred space is that it truly is whatever you want. Just like your spirituality truly is whatever you want. It's so individual that no one, Jane, can tell you what you should put on your altar. You know, that is completely up to you. And so, sure, people can make recommendations, crystals and stones and cards and incense and instruments and statues. And yes, sure, all of those are wonderful things to put on your altar. And Jane, if they don't resonate with you, then don't worry about it. It doesn't belong. That's really the most important part of what goes on your altar and what an altar is all about. It's all about what feels right for you. And again, that may change as you grow and expand, as you change in your spirituality, what you want or need or resonates with you can, is, and will change. So don't worry whenever you find something on your altar and say, yeah, I no longer want that on my altar. And that is okay. It does not need to be a static thing where you always have the same materials on it. And it can be growing and shifting and changing. And that is a natural part of the altering process. Altering process. Let's see, what else about altars, Jane? You don't even have to have one, and that is okay. There was a point in my life where I didn't have an altar, and to me, the way that I kind of regarded it was that the altar was inside of me. So the altar lived in me, and that is something for you to consider as well, Jane. You don't have to have an altar, but these can be very calming, very just wonderful spaces for you to go to that create peace and a sense of calm and just a place where you can go. So I do recommend altars. And I also want to share with you a wonderful thing that I recently heard about altars, Jane. Not that long ago. Let's see, it was by my friend Jenny Luddington on her podcast, The Wheel. It's a lovely pagan podcast, pagan-centered podcast. Actually, I was blessed to be able to be on the podcast a couple of months ago in episode 28. But in one episode, Jenny mentioned her altar and said that, she was having a challenging time and in her life, and one of her friends said to her, Jenny, tend to your altar. And when Jenny said that, it was just amazing. Like, wow, yes, that is so true. If you are experiencing a challenge, if you are going through some maybe emotional challenges, some thing in life, maybe you're upset, anxious, whatever it might be, go take care of your altar. Go clean it off, dust it off, touch the objects that are on it, interact with them. That interaction with your sacred space is going to help you feel better on the inside. So remember, it's that external expression of your internal space. And so anytime you're feeling like maybe you need a little pick-me-up in life, maybe life is getting you down, you can go tend to your altar, and that external space, taking care of that external space, will help you to feel spruced up in your internal space. So I pass along that tip to Jane, that once you have an altar, you can always view it as a dynamic thing that you take care of, but that will also take care of you. Which, well, of course, that's the way most things in life work. You take care of them, and they will take care of you. So, Jane, those are my thoughts on altars. Of course, there are books about altars that you can check out and get some ideas for your own altar. The possibilities really are endless. The kind of way in which you set it up, whether it's on a table, an end table, on a bookshelf, on top of a stereo, that is endless. Where you put your altar is endless. What you put on your altar, the possibilities are endless. Whatever you put on your altar is your choice. If you think that you would like to have an altar, the answer is yes. So if this is something that is tugging at you, then do it. And don't give it a second thought. Don't delay with all kinds of questions. Well, what table should I use? And should it be a little end table, or should it be a big table? Or what color should it be? Should I put a tablecloth on it? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I put this on it, that on it? If you ask all of those questions and have them all answered before you start your altar, you're never going to have your altar. So don't worry about answering all of those questions. Just get started. Just find a space and start plunking stuff down on it. Well, plunk it down in a sacred kind of way, because remember, this is a sacred space. So do your plunking with intention. Wonderful. Jane, thank you. I so am happy to talk about altars. And thank you so much to be able to talk about my own altar, which is a very sacred space to me. It changes and grows as I change and grow. Actually, I should probably tend my altar. That would be a good thing for me to do. Since I have not done that recently. So I should tend my altar as well, Jane. So, Jane, let me pull a couple of cards for you for your altar journey, and let's see what kind of guidance we might have. I'm going to pull for you an Archangel card to see what the angels might have to say. Now, for me, Jane, I'm a big believer in bringing the outside inside. And so I do have on my altar lots of natural objects, feathers and rocks. Actually, there's even a piece of moss on it right now. When I was out hiking earlier this week, I came home and on my backpack, there was a piece of moss attached. I love moss. And so that straight away went directly onto my altar. So I am always picking up things from outside, whether I mean to or not, obviously. So I have a lot of natural objects on my altar. Other people might have a lot of crystals, candles, incense. I mean, just anything and everything, Jane, that resonates with you. And that's the important point. So as I was shuffling, a card popped out, and it's sitting here on my lap. So let's turn it over and see what it says. Teaching and learning. Archangel Zadkiel says, keep an open mind and learn new ideas. Then teach these ideas to others. Yes, Jane, go ahead and learn all that you wish about altars. And then don't be afraid to pass that knowledge along to others, to teach others about altars, because this is a topic that is really so accessible. Anyone can learn about altars. Anyone can teach or talk about altars, because the real teaching point here is that whatever feels right to you in your soul, that's what an altar is all about. You can also, Jane, make temporary altars. So an altar doesn't just have to be a permanent space in your home. You can make an altar anywhere. So you can make an altar, an impromptu altar when you are out in nature. You can make an altar in your backyard. You can make an altar anywhere. I will say that if you do create an altar in nature, please don't leave things there that don't belong. So, creating an altar in nature is nice, but carry in, carry out, that saying of being out in the woods. Whatever you take in, please take out. And please don't leave any trash or anything behind that doesn't belong. But yes, you can make altars wherever you might like. So let's draw a rune here and see what we have for the runes. How lovely, Jane. I've just pulled the rune of growth. And yes, I think that this altar for you, the altar is a growth point for you. And I think that as you get into creating and interacting with your altar, you are going to experience some spiritual growth, and this having an altar is a real growth opportunity for you, Jane. And remember, Jane, that it is a dynamic thing, so it's something that you will want to interact with. Just like with anything, if you just throw some things on a table in the corner and leave it there, it's not going to be a living, breathing thing. But your altar is something that you'll want to interact with. It's something that you, as a sacred space, will want to use, and use it as a place where you can center yourself and go to do your spiritual work and to access your sacredness and to tap into your spirituality. So I do recommend, Jane, whatever altar you set up, in whatever way, shape, or form that you set it up, I do recommend that you use it. I'm going to send a little Reiki right now to your altar. And I know that maybe you don't have your altar yet, but I am going to send Reiki to that altar as you get it set up and as you experience and appreciate your altar. So let us take a moment and let's take a few deep cleansing breaths. And Jane, I'm going to send Reiki to your altar. And for any of you listening, I am going to send Reiki to your altar as well. This also makes me think of the idea of making sure to keep your altar as a place of love and light. So sometimes we might hear about people who have on their altars, different kinds of quote unquote black magic things, maybe they're sending out negative energy from their altars. And so I really want to encourage you, Jane, and encourage everyone to keep your altar as a sacred space of love and light. Remember, this is an extension of your insides. At least is the way that I view it. An extension of your spirituality. And so please, I do encourage you to keep that loving and to keep that light and to use it to send out good wishes and blessings to the world and bring in good wishes and blessings for yourself. An altar is a space of sending out and bringing in. And so be mindful, again, that idea of intention. Be mindful of what you are placing on your altar and what you are sending out into the world, and therefore what you are bringing in to your own inner world. Love and light and best wishes and blessings for your altar, Jane, and for all of our altars. Thank you, Jane, for this question. I send you great blessings for your journey. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Ask the Stones. I send you love and light and blessings for your journey and for your altars. Again, I am Christian of Standing Stones Healing, where my mission is to support your journey with healing experiences, coaching, and encouragement for life's changes, challenges, and transitions. Best wishes for your journey. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ask the Stones. If you have a question for Ask the Stones, please send me an email at christian@standingstoneshealing.com or connect with me on Facebook at Standing Stones Healing. Thank you, and best wishes for your journey.